So this weekend, got a big triple header taking place on HBO. Miguel Berchelt versus Takashi Miura, Jezreel Corrales versus Robinson Castellanos, and Joe Smith Jr. versus Sullivan Barrera. 235-pound fights, aka super featherweight, and a light heavyweight fight featuring two of the top level contenders looking to try and get up into the championship run. As for the two super featherweight fights, I'm going to cover those real quick first. You got Miguel Berchelt in the main event, defending his WBC super featherweight championship against Takashi Miura. Of course, Berchelt and Miura share an opponent in Francisco Vargas. Miura lost to Vargas to lose his WBC championship that he had held for several years up until that point. And then Vargas wound up losing to Berchelt, losing that belt to Berchelt. So now Miura basically gets a chance at redemption, so to speak, being able to possibly win his title back. That said, I don't necessarily see this going especially well for Miura, and I think that in a way there's a little bit too much talk of people saying like, oh, well, Miura's coming off all these wars and this and that. Even independent of the possible wear and tear that Miura's had on him, I just think that Berchelt stylistically matches up really, really poorly for Miura. Insofar as Miura having a really great chance of winning this fight. I do think that if Miura catches Berchelt cold early on and either is able to knock him out within the first few rounds or able to drag him into a kind of a firefight where he's able to clip him early and sap a lot of the energy that would thusly kind of take a lot of stamina out of his tank for the long haul. If he's not able to do that, I don't really see it going particularly well for him, because Berchelt is very stylistically similar to Francisco Vargas, albeit he hits much harder. I think he has slightly better footwork, a little bit quicker on his feet. I think the only minus that you could compare Berchelt to Vargas with is he doesn't stick the jab quite as much. The thing about Vargas is a lot of times he'll dispense with the jab altogether in his own right. So even though Berchelt's jab isn't quite as educated as Vargas is, I wouldn't necessarily say, I do think that it does land harder when he does throw it on occasion, and everything that he's following up with is coming up just much more heavy. And so, I mean, just that said, I think that Miura's going to wind up taking a pretty bad beating in there. I mean, I do think that Miura is a very brave fighter, a very strong-chinned, strong-willed fighter in there. He's going to give it his all, and he's going to try and make a show out of it. But unfortunately for him, I think that Berchelt is going to make a show out of him. I think Berchelt is going to show why, guys like Vasyl Lomachenko and his backers and hangers-on and such weren't very anxious to fight him and basically told him to fuck off when it came time to defend their title against him, because he was the mandatory. He was the WBO mandatory. That shit was written over a year and a half ago. Back when he was the mandatory challenger to I'm forgetting his name now, Roman Martinez. He was the mandatory challenger to Roman Martinez. Roman Martinez pulls out damn near at the last minute with like a week or two to go with a supposed injury, quote unquote, and then all of a sudden, before their fight was even supposed to have taken place, he's already signing to fight Vasyl Lomachenko instead, and basically sell out that belt for a higher bidding. And I mean, hey, he got his money, but they screwed over Berchelt in the process. It's nice to see Berchelt at the very least getting a little bit of recognition in the aftermath of all that, though, because he did do the damn thing by taking out Francisco Vargas, and now he's gonna look to continue to kind of consummate that championship, and prove that he's deservingly a champion in the division, and should deservingly be at a higher rating than Lomachenko is in that division, simply because Lomachenko lost to Salido. Salido fought on even terms with Vargas, and Berchelt pretty much wiped Vargas out very, very cleanly and clearly. As the co-feature for this card, Jezreel Corrales, of course, defending his WBA Super Featherweight Championship versus Robinson Castellanos. Of course, Castellanos got the big upset victory over Yuriorkis Gamboa recently. Has several other upsets under his belt, however. A guy that's become a bit of an upset special in recent years. Comes from a similar school to an Orlando Salido or like Glenn Johnson or Sakio Bika, a bit of a journeyman fighter. Had a lot of losses early on in his record, managed to learn from all those losses and show and prove and become a high-level operator. Pull off big upsets over the likes of Celestino Caballero, Derek Wilson, Rocky Juarez, Juan Rios. Almost defeated Oscar Escandon a little over a year ago. And, of course, Escandon recently just gave a good fight to Gary Russell Jr. And, of course, just recently, as I mentioned previously, pulled off the big upset over Yorkis Gamboa. And, with Gamboa looking to try and get a title shot. And so now Castellanos is the one getting the shot at super featherweight now here. Former featherweight contender, defeated Gamboa at lightweight and settling in, splitting the difference between the two and looking to fight the number one man, the man of the division, Jezreel Corrales. And he absolutely is the man of the division because he beat the man in Takashi Uchiyama. No other fighter beat the man other than him. Uchiyama was the guy that people were clamoring for Mikey Garcia and Adrian Broner to fight back when they were at super featherweight. They never got a chance to fight him. The number 2 fighter was Takashi Miura, a fighter that Uchiyama himself had knocked out previously, amongst other high-level fighters. And Corrales finally was the one to knock Uchiyama out, and then, of course, defeat him in a rematch by unanimous decision, showing that he could box as well as he could punch. Here against Castellanos, I think it's a very interesting matchup between these two. Castellanos, as he's shown in the past, is very good at being able to upset people, and is very good at catching people that like to kind of pot shot from the outside coming in, which is something that Corrales really likes to do. He's a very improvisational kind of first quick step based fighter. He's looking to try and get that snap off, get that pop off that first quick step, and then when he's all the way on the inside, he'll roughhouse you a little bit, but unless you're able to kind of catch him in that midway point between when he's all the way on the outside and all the way on the inside, it's very, very difficult to really get a beat on him unless you're able to do that, or if you're able to put in some body work, which Uchiyama was able to do somewhat of in the later rounds of their rematch. Was a little bit too little too late for Uchiyama, however. But for Castellanos, he is somebody that is very good at going to the body and is very good at being able to catch guys from the outside lunging in, which Corrales, as I said, is prone to do. And if he's able to do that, he may be able to pull off, once again, another upset and wind up becoming the champion and the man of the division himself. Corrales, though, I do think is going to be just a little bit too quick for him. And I imagine that he'll be just a slight step, a slight tick ahead of Castellanos most of the way through the fight. I think that he'll be beating Castellanos to the punch more often than not. It's a very intriguing matchup, however, and a fight that even just the way that I see it going with Corrales winning, the way that I see Corrales winning it, I think that it's going to be a fairly even, fairly well-contested, well-fought fight all the way through the 12 rounds that it takes place at. There is a possibility that Corrales could catch Castellanos. I mean, he definitely has power of his own, as he showed against Uchiyama. Castellanos has been knocked out before as well. But once again, Castellanos, he can catch you slipping. If he catches you slipping, that could be your downfall. It could be your ass, and that could be the end of your night. But that's all for that one. Joe Smith Jr. versus Sullivan Barrera. Very intriguing matchup at light heavyweight. I mean, Joe Smith coming off the big knockout victories over Andre Fanfara and Bernard Hopkins. Sullivan Barrera, of course, coming off that very, very good victory over Vyacheslav Shabransky. Just previous to that, gave Andre Ward, a reasonably competitive fight. Ward definitely won it clearly, but gave him a lot of trouble all along the way. I think that fight was a lot closer than people really gave it credit for being. I mean, I think that some of the damage showed even on Andre Ward's side of things, especially in particular. Barrera, I think, has kind of come into his own a little bit better. I do think he still waits a little bit too long, and that's a big part of the reason why I favor Joe Smith. Joe Smith, even though he isn't necessarily the most technically sound or the most technically textbook, having the most pretty style to look at, he's effective in what he does, and he kind of knows. He knows his own craft. He knows his own style. He knows how to work within his own style. And, that's just being kind of rough, rugged, and raw. And I think that he'll be able to draw a lot of that out of Barrera. Whereas while Barrera's kind of waiting a little bit too long to try and get his shots off, I think that Smith will be just throwing those shots and looking to make something happen, regardless of whether the opening's there or not. He's looking to make his own openings and draw the openings out of Barrera. And so for that, I do favor Joe Smith. He definitely is a banger, a bomber. Barrera has been put down several times recently. Is he chinny? Maybe, possibly. Also might just be the fact that, he is definitely very open as he's trying to get his own offense off. And I think that is something that Smith could potentially take advantage of. That said, this is another very intriguing fight. Very close fight that I wouldn't put Barrera outside of the realm of actually winning. even possibly by knockout, but I wouldn't necessarily put my money on. I'd imagine Smith is going to win this fight. I think he's kind of poised to win this fight. He's on the upswing a little bit more so than Barrera is. And I do think that within his own style, he'll be able to make more things happen in the rhythm of his style of fight than Barrera will be able to, or will be able to counter against. So that said, I do think that Smith will be winning a close fight all the way through, whether he happens to win by decision or possibly even stops Barrera late in the fight. Based off of the accumulation of damage. I mean, he was able to eventually catch up and get rid of Hopkins. I could very well see him potentially doing the same thing to Barrera. He definitely has the power to do so, and just the belief in that power and the wherewithal to make that power work for him. But once again, as I said before, he can be a little bit vulnerable in his own right. I mean, Fonfara definitely had him a little bit shaken up before Smith ended Fonfara very, very abruptly. So Barrera could very well pull off another big one the same way they did to Shabransky. But all that said, I will catch you guys in the aftermath with my review of the fight, and I'll see you guys then. Peace.